Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of OneMicNite podcast, a podcast that brings you stories of artists and people on their journey, helping to guide, answer questions, and motivate you in the business. My name is Marcos Luis, and if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. Please stop what you're doing right now, drop down, click that button, click the bell, because you don't want to miss any episodes. We're dropping episodes every Wednesday, but we might find a couple of episodes in between, so you don't want to miss those. You can find us at OneMicNite. OneMicNite is spelled OneMicNite. Today, I am very excited. You have no idea. I am so happy because this is my first two-person interview and talk, and I have two dynamic, powerful women here for you to meet. So my first guest her name is Wendy Angulo. Make sure I say that right? She is a mom. She's a Latina as fuck. She's a lawyer, a writer, a project manager, a visionary, a trailblazer. My second guest who goes along with her is Mariela Regalado. She's a storyteller. She's Dominican. She's a career educator, and she's a consultant. And they're both here to blow up OneMicNite for me. Welcome. How are you?
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you both for coming. Listen, I have questions.
All right, we have answers.
That's right. First of all, we're going to do this one by one. Who is Wendy Angulo?
Ooh. Well, as you mentioned before, I'm a mother first. I'm a New York City-born Latina, raised in Caracas, Venezuela. I'm an attorney. I'm a curator, producer, arts advocate, born and a resident of Queens in New York. And I'm a lover of words. I'm a writer. And I'm an artist. I'm an artist, first and foremost.
You're every woman.
Yeah.
Who is Mariela?
Mariela, let's see. Well, like Wendy, I'm a mom first. And it's an interesting phase because I actually gave birth to my daughter during the pandemic. Wow. So my daughter is like a pandemic baby.
Baby.
Yeah, she was born April 28th, 2020. But before I was her mom, I was also, and still am, like storyteller, cuentacuentos, like performer, poetry. And then my professional passion is working with students, so college and career access. And then I was kind of like, I always say I was a little bit ahead of the trend because I started working virtual in 2019. And then I've been doing that ever since.
I like that.
Always merging both passions, I think, is who I am. And then now I'm a mom first. Yeah.
An added bonus.
Yeah, exactly.
So I want to take it back a little bit, and you can answer, whoever wants to answer first, you can. But what was growing up like for you? I mean, I guess we can start with Wendy. What was growing up like for you?
Ooh, well, I was born in New York, then I went back to Venezuela with my mother. And, growing up, both my parents were very artistic in their own way, and they always inflicted me that part of being a human was being connected with art. So from a very early age, I've been writing. I remember one of my early Christmas gifts was a journal by my mom. Oh. So I used to journal since I was 7 years old. And then with my dad, because my dad, I would spend all my summers here in New York. So with my dad, I learned to be so in love with art as a performer. Like, he would take me to plays and then the museums.
That's amazing.
So, I've been in the Met since I was 5, 7, 6, 7 years old. I've been around the Met. Central Park was like my playground in the days. I remember seeing Cats and the Phantom of the Opera, from a very early age, knowing what Broadway is, and then interacting and being and relating to art. So for me, not having art, I wouldn't know how to be a human by not having art.
Right.
And then
always had it.
Yeah.
Yes. And then my mom was an avid reader, so she had a book club, and I remember reading stories. And then my dad was very into music, so I know from an early age, I know about Janis Joplin and Michael Jackson and Janet Jackson and the Jackson's 5 and all those things. And Madonna was big.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, his gift was the Michael Jackson jacket. And my first LP was Thriller.
Wow. So the hold Michael Jackson has on like Latino and like Black communities,
that's
right?
crazy. Yeah, that is crazy.
And my sister was very into acting and singing, and she still does that like on her as a hobby. So growing up, I was always the producer. So I would put together the show, and my cousins and my sister will be like the actresses, and they will dance menudo because growing up,
yeah.
thing. But I was always the producer. I was the host, and they would come and do like the Sábado Gigante.
Right.
Yeah. The variety show.
Show. Yep.
So that was me growing up.
I love that. So you were kind of cultivated. You were in it from an early age, just all the way through. So yeah, that makes sense. What about you, Mariela?
So I actually started my childhood in the Dominican Republic, and I came to Brooklyn when I was about 4 or 5 years old. But the thing for me growing up, for some reason or another, I always gravitated towards like reading books and the library and things like that. And I was also a really good student. So I remember like in junior high school and like in middle school, when I would finish with my work, I would tell my teacher, like, can I go to the library? And like they would let me go because they'd be like, oh yeah, sure. And I feel like as an adult and like as an educator, if a student were to ask me that, I feel like I'd be like, yeah, go. So I grew up where school was my sanctuary, where, my brother and sister and I, whatever after school program they had, like after school, weekends, like during the break, during the summer, whatever program they had, it was like, sign us up. We'll be there. And so that gave us the opportunity to do a little bit of everything. But I gravitated towards like being in the library, reading. When I was in the 3rd grade, I won a storytelling contest that they did in elementary school. It was like, I read a book called The Town Mouse and the Country Mouse. And I never forget it. I actually bought the book for my daughter. It was a picture book. And so in the storytelling contest, you had to memorize it and, recite it. And I loved it. Yeah. And then when I got into like middle school and junior high school, I started like acting. Like I remember in the 5th grade, it was like the Polar Express. And it was like a big deal because I had like speaking lines. Mind you, it was like 3 lines. And then, like later on, we put on another play. And that was really when the advocate side came out, because I remember I was going to play like a waitress. And one of the props that I had to make for myself was like an apron. And I remember my mom was like, really? Like, esa es la parte que tú vas a jugar? And I was like, yeah, because I'm over here excited because I'm like, I got to act, I get to do all this. And my mom was kind of like, they didn't have another part to give you, right? And so it was interesting because I feel kind of like what Wendy mentioned, where like arts is a part of like the fiber of your being, but it's also connected to like many of the advocacy things that we do.
Absolutely.
And so as an adult, you start thinking about those things and you're like, wow, that makes sense why I started then digging into that. So I always had that. I remember my dad had that VHS camcorder, the one that like opens the little, so he was always at like the winter recitals with the little camcorder. So I did grow up with parents that supported that. And I was lucky that my siblings and I had that to like fall on, right? Because it was also like they were working, and so we loved school, so it kind of like worked out. And then I loved school so much that after I went to college, I decided to become a college and career counselor, right? So that's been like my childhood so far. And of course, like I've had some trajectory where I grew up in the Marcy projects in Brooklyn, and so navigating when people say like, oh, well, you don't look like you're from the projects. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Like, what am I supposed to look like?
Right.
You know? So just navigating what that meant. Like, I also grew up in Williamsburg in 94, where it was like gentrification was like bursting. Like that was like the tip of the iceberg, right?
Right.
So compare like 1994 Williamsburg to what it is now, you know, and then you're a kid and you watch that entire transformation. And now as an adult, you don't even recognize it anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
How did you get the courage to continue on? I mean, you know, if you start out in the projects, you know, we come from humble beginnings, some of us, most of us. How do we get the courage to go on and say, yeah, I want to do arts? Or
I don't think we had a choice.
Right. Or even know that there's another world out there. I mean, you know, Wendy, you said you grew up in New York. That's the best place to grow up. You know what I mean? Like you see the world from here. Everyone wants to be in New York. You have access to Broadway. You have access to all these people, you know, by diversity, all the different people here. But some people coming from, you know, the small places or small places like DR, you know, you don't know. How do you?
I think it's also having, like Mariela said, that support system from your parents, where remember when we are children of immigrants, all we know is to survive.
Yeah.
Right.
So we are constantly trying to keep ourselves and fight the good fight, because we are a stereotype. This is why Mariela's mom was like, oh, they couldn't give you another part, because in her mind, because you're the Latina girl, so you're gonna be the maid, because that's how high we can go. For Mariela, it was just the opportunity to be, because you still have that innocence where I just want to be in the play. You know, it's like as we grow up, it's like, oh, but you want to put me in a box. Right. Because you remember when I returned to New York in '98, and I write a lot about that. It's that intersectionality. When you come back home, because New York has always been my home, but then I have to check forms where I have to let people know if I'm Hispanic, your ethnicity, and your race. Right. And for me, it has always been, but I always be Latina. What else would I be? Why do I have to tell you I'm just a woman?
Right. Yeah.
It don't matter if I'm Indian or Asian or Latina. I'm a woman. That's what matters. So that is a shock, and then I think that also gives you that push that I'm gonna show you all the things that I could be. And I always have my mom in my ear, like, you can be whatever you want, but you got to do the work. So I think that's the key. When you got to do the work.
Right. And that was going to be my next question. Who was the inspiration for you to continue on? Who did you look up to? Who did you look out and say, okay, this is what's driving me. I want to be like that. Or someone pushing you from behind and saying, yeah.
It's interesting though, because even like Wendy says, like with her mom, like I had my mom and dad as well. And I feel like it was interesting because my mom and dad motivated, you know, my siblings and I, because they had in their head what they wanted us to strive for, right? And so the example from them was, I want you to work hard so you can get what I never got. Right? But then at the same time, I was also lucky enough to be at a school and in after school programs. And then when I was in high school, I was part of like a mentorship program. Then I had an internship. And so because of school and like succeeding at academics, I always had mentors that were kind of like this example or this like hashtag goals of what I wanted to reach. So it was interesting because both of those things inspired me. But I think knowing your history and knowing where you come from, and then you couple that with good mentorship, I think is what made all the difference for my life.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think mentorship is super important. Because even though I, you know, my mom was number one mentor, I also had mentors in school. I had mentors at work, in my writing groups, in my arts community, people that push you because they see your drive and your passion and the work that you do, and they just keep pushing.
Listen, Wendy, let me tell you something. You just, like, my head's about to explode because the first question you asked me was, am I a teacher? Do I teach workshops? And it never occurred to me, like I've never had the passion to teach. But in the midst of this conversation, now you're flipping something on me. And so now I'm going to have to reevaluate my own perspective of things. Why am I not mentoring people? If I have the knowledge, to do it, why wouldn't I do it?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because sometimes the mentorship comes when people come to you and they relate to your story.
Right.
Like you're an actor, you are on stage. And then when the play is finished, people come after the play to, say hi to you and how they felt, how you made them feel with your character. So that's right there, the spark of the mentor.
Yeah. Connecting with you.
You never wake up like, oh, I want to be a mentor. It's that relationship, that relatability with the other human that you're like, oh, so what I'm doing, it's like, in a way, it's the validation of your work.
Yeah.
Right.
That your work sparks something. Like for me, always, I want my work to spark change. I want to be an agent of change. That's my purpose. That's what I'm trying to do with the work that I do.
Absolutely.
And when you go and watch one of my shows or you're part of one of the programs that I create, it does something to you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Let's get into that. So how do you guys know each other?
Oh my gosh.
From the writing circle.
Yeah, from the writing circle. Yeah.
Yeah. From where?
Yeah, we met at someone's event.
I feel like we saw each other a couple of times at because I feel like with the New York City writing scene and the the social justice arts scene, I feel like you keep hearing about certain people and you bump into them at events, right? And I remember we bumped into each other a few times, but then when we really got to know each other was at a writing class together, and then from there we've been like this.
I love that. So let's talk, Wendy. Let's talk about your organization, because you were mentioning that before when you're putting on performances. What's the name of your organization?
Wendy Angulo Productions.
Okay. Tell us about that.
Well, I created Wendy Angulo Productions in 2013 when I started going around in the writing scene and the poetry scene, the New York Poets Cafe, Capicu in Brooklyn. There were other shows in the Bronx, and I'm from Queens. And I was always the only one from Queens, the only poet and writer. Like,
in the house.
That's funny.
Brooklyn, yeah. Queens.
And it's just Wendy.
Right. When was this? Was the 2000s? Like, what are we talking about? What time frame?
2013. Like
2013.
2013.
Okay. All right.
So I was
from New Eureka, you should have gone over One More Avenue, because that's where OneMicNite was.
Oh,
we were on Avenue C, and I had poetry at OneMicNite.
Oh, look at that. That's hilarious.
I was like, oh, hell no. How is this possible when Queens is the melting pot?
Yeah.
Right.
You have everything. So I was like, oh, no. What's happening? So I was taking a writing class with the New York City Latina Writers Group. And I remember I went there just to check it out. Like, I was just going to be an audience member. And I remember, and I went to a workshop. It was like they had like monthly meetings. Mm-hmm. And I just went there just to check it out. So in my mind, I'm just going to be an audience member and hear the writers share their story. But the founder had a different motive. She was like, oh no, you're coming here to write. And I was right? I was like, mind you, all I have written is in my journal. Those are like personal stories. That's me in my journal only. So I'm like, oh, hell no. I have no choice. So she was giving prompts. So I started writing, and then we had to share. So I'm listening to all these writers that they have been published already, all Latinas, and I'm just in awe, and I'm like, man, like, where am I this? And then I share my story, and they were all like, oh wow, you have a story to tell.
Wow.
That was the beginning of Wendy Angulo.
Wow.
Because then I signed up for an intensive workshop with her, and that's how my manuscript of my memoir was born.
Wow.
See what happens when we get past the fear?
Yes.
Look at that. Look at that.
Yeah. Yes.
I love that story.
I just went there just to check it out, just to be, just to be like I always been an arts an arts lover. So I just wanted to be there just to hear their stories and relate to them as an audience member. I didn't want to be a part of the creation.
Life had other plans.
It sure did. It was already written.
That's when I create, being around them and going, I started going to events. So there was no people from Queens, and I was like, no, these have to change. And I had so many ideas. And that's when I came up with the idea of Canvas of Words. That was my first event. And I did it in Queens, and it was a sold out show. I brought
What is Canvas of Words?
Canvas of Words is a collaboration of distinguished artists and emerging writers. Because then again, the mentorship came up. So I had this idea that I was like, all right, we're gonna have a theme. I'm gonna give these artists a theme because my job is the creator and producer. So I was like, well, we're gonna write because they had to write new work. And I was gonna pair them with emerging writers. And this was, at the first one was all poetry, and they had to perform the poetry. But then I wanted to add like a visual component. So I did painting. For the first installment, I did painting. So I hired 3 emerging painters that were coming up from different boroughs. We met the writers, and the writers shared their poems, and they had to create a painting from that poem.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
The poem had to be translated into a painting. And we were going to have an exhibition and then the performance. And that's what we did. And I at that time, a friend of mine, the mom was a member of a church. So they had like a stage, and I rented the stage, and it was huge, and we had 200 people.
Wow, look at that.
And that's when the whole social media was just picking up, Facebook. And I remember, because of all the experience that I had as an audience member, I said, well, but I need a promo video for this. So I hired one of the poets, advocate of words. He's also a videographer. So he created a video.
I know him.
A promo video.
I was like, you know that?
You know what I'm saying? He performed at OneMicNite. Where were you?
Yes.
Where were you, Mariela? Where
he
were
was
you
at the
guys?
Nuyorican. I was probably in DR.
So we did a promo video, and then I started doing those little promos that Instagram does now with the bio and the picture.
Yeah.
I did that at that time. So it was like, people were not used to that. And, it just sparked an interest. And I had people that had never seen poetry being performed, because, a lot of people think always of poetry like a love poem.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And roses are red and violets are blue. And I'm like, no, poetry is more. And
the poetry of dead white men.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And
Right.
these were poems that had to do with our stories.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up in New York, growing up in the Bronx, being Puerto Rican, being Dominican, being Afro-Latino.
Yeah.
So the audience was able to relate. And the show was a 5-hour show. And I kid you not,
Wow.
no left. From beginning to end, I had 200 people.
That's beautiful.
Shout out to Los Gritos de Poetas. who-
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
they featured at OneMicNite so many times, and I cannot repay them. I have no way to repay them for what they did.
Chaz
Yeah.
was the host of that first Canvas of Words.
Wow.
And Chino was there too performing. Tito Luna was there too performing. He's part of the promo video too.
That's
beautiful.
amazing. That is. Mariela, you do a
Yeah.
little something too. Now you help with
I do a little something.
do a little something. I know you do a little something, but you work with an organization that helps out in the Dominican Republic, in DR, right?
Yeah. So it all comes down to like that it takes a village, right? Like we talk about village and
Absolutely.
like that community aspect all the time, and I truly do believe in that. And I think that everything happens for a reason. Like there are so many full circle moments, and I think that'll only happen like if you're in alignment, right? I think if you're in alignment and you know your purpose and you're following it through and like you're surrendering to what the universe has for you, I really feel like those full circle moments are so easy to pick up on.
I'm going to cut you off for 1 second.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
What you just said, people say that all the time, but it is 100% true. 100% true.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And that's how you know. And like, you know, we talk about Mercury retrograde all the time. And I was telling a friend of mine, I was like, I don't suffer during the retrogrades because I'm in alignment, right? It's like, you know, but it was interesting because I was doing my college and career, like counseling and all that stuff. And I loved my job. And I think one of the best things is that other people saw how much I loved my job too. And I was given like different awards and stuff. And a lot of my students would always come out on the news. And it was just beautiful to see that, you know, more and more people were seeing a student from the Bronx who like came here in middle school, didn't speak English, and then now he's going to Columbia University, right? A student who's like in a wheelchair, mom died, lives in a shelter, and now like she graduated from NYU, right? So it was like all these different stories, right? And I remember, again, like that social justice part, I remember I told the students, I was like, remember why they're prancing you around. I was like, yes, you absolutely flex, brag, you deserve the attention,
right?
But remember what they're really like celebrating you for, right? They're celebrating you because you're the one that managed to like break that system, right? They're celebrating the fact that, you know, someone like us, someone like you wasn't supposed to be there, but you guys got there, right? And essentially that's what we do, right? When we create like poster childs and for different things, essentially what we're telling them is you broke into a system, you found a way to become that one person to get there. And then when they would tell me like, oh, miss, like, I can never pay you back. And I was like, yeah, you can. Because what I want you to do is to make sure that you're the only one there now. But next year, there's 2 more. The following, there's 5 more. And that one day we're going to look back and it's not going to be celebrated anymore because it's already like, you know, the standard. And then at the same time, I'm over here, like I'm taking writing classes, VONA, New York City Latina Writers Group, like all these different classes. And then I ended up doing a one-woman show and it was called Dear Future, which is pretty funny because fast forward like 10 years and I'm kind of living that future, right?
Oh, wow.
So I did a one-woman show like through all the different intensives and writing classes that I took, and it was called Dear Future. And the original plan was for it to be showcased at a theater in Harlem, along with a couple other one-person plays. And again, the universe, right, will always have your back, because that ended up falling through and I was no longer able to do my play in that festival. But then a friend of mine, Modesto Flaco Jimenez, who at that time it was called the Brooklyn Gypsies. Now it's called the Oye Group, which is like insane what they've been able to do and like how they keep evolving year after year. He gave me the opportunity to perform at Spaceworks in Williamsburg. And then I performed at the Bushwick Star Theater, and then it just like kept going and going and going and going. And then I was able to walk away from that feeling like so fulfilled that not only did I create this screenplay from poems, but that I also learned technique and I practiced my ass off. And, you know, I was able to, you know, do this play and like market it myself and, you know, direct it myself and act in it myself. And then after that, I just took the biggest break from art, because I think when you accomplish projects like that, you have to give yourself like time to kind of, you know,
to recharge. Yeah. In every way.
Exactly.
Every
and
way.
then now, you know, it's about to get interesting. Because now we got a couple things that you're like, okay, you know. So stay tuned.
I like that. So now I want to touch on a couple of things real quick, because I think I'm running out of time here. I don't know why, but you won a Citicorp Artist Grant.
Yes, she did.
Yeah, and that's how I found you. So tell us a little bit about the project and how you know.
Well, you know, Canvas of Words has been like my baby, and I have done different installments, like I told you, but then I took a break. I did 4 installments, then I did a New York City tour, all the boards, and then, like Mariela said, I took a break, and then I focused on creating programming, on being the arts advocate. But people kept asking, when are you bringing Canvas Awards? And I have to say, Mariela was a pusher. When are you bringing Canvas? So every time there was an opportunity, because Mariela is very resourceful, and that has been our friendship. Like, we always find opportunities for one another. And we cheer each other up, like, apply. And so she found this, and she was like, you need to apply. I think this will be a great opportunity to bring Canvas Awards, because when I created Canvas Awards, I envision it to be an arts program for kids in our communities, because we don't have that.
We don't.
Those arts programs have been removed. And because I have been a child who benefited from that, and so has been Mariela, this is my way to pay it forward. And because I have also inflicted that on my own son, who's 18 now, but he was always around my shows, and he performed on my shows, and he has been part of like the production side. So I have seen firsthand with myself, and then with my son, the impact that art has in your life. So I wanted to bring that back, and that's when we were in the middle of a pandemic, and I said to Mariela, well, let's do it, let's pair up with a school. And then, I'm very blessed to have incredible friends that they never say no, and they always happy. So I paired with a friend that knew somebody at a school in Queens, and I wanted the kids to write their pandemic stories, because I knew by hand, because at that time when the pandemic happened, my son was about to graduate high school. And we have a project that we have created called Operation Gratitude, where we started that, and it was also in Mariela, where we sponsor families on Thanksgiving, and we buy all their groceries, families in needs in our communities. So the first year, I was only able to sponsor one family.
One of my students.
And it was one of Mariela's students. And then, I always pray for the project, for God to give me enough blessing, enough share for me to help more than one. So as the project has been happening, it went from one family to 3 to 4. And during the pandemic, I paired with a good friends organization, Grow Society, and we went live, and we fed over 200 families in that year.
I love that.
That's when I knew
incredible
firsthand how our communities were suffering. Because remember, with the immigrants, a lot of my son's friends, the parents were working at the bodega and the supermarket. They were not able to file for unemployment, but the bills were coming,
right?
And food was running, and there were no computers, and they had no outlet to express that. So that's how Canvas Award, the pandemic story. So we fill out the application, and I was awarded the grant.
Congratulations!
Yeah, congratulations on that.
Thank you. So we paired up with a school in Queens, and the kids wrote. I paired them with 2 teaching artists, and they wrote short stories, poems, songs, and they perform. And then we picked 3 winners, and they receive a cash gift. And we also provided them with lunch that day. And now we're putting together the stories as a digital anthology for them to have them.
Look at you. Wow, this is exactly what. Now you guys have a podcast called the Trailblazer, the podcast, and that's exactly what both of you are doing. First of all, I have so much to talk to you guys about, but unfortunately I'm out of time. But I want to have you back. Please tell us how we can get in touch with you. How can we follow you? How can we help you?
Well, you can follow me at Wendy Angulo Productions is my website. My personal IG is Mger _de calidad, Mujer de calidad. And we have an IG for the podcast, Trailblazers, the podcast. And right now we're in pre-production of season 3.
Yes.
Love it. I love it.
And mine is straight through. It's my name, Mariela, and then Regal, because they never let me put my entire But maybe we could do part 2 over on the Trailblazer side.
I would love that. I was going to say, I know you're empowering women, but I'll be there to flip it around and help keep empowering you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I would love that. I would love that.
Thank you for having us.
I want to thank you both for coming.
Yeah. This was like another like thing for us to be like, yes, you know, we're working on the podcast, and it's like another push for us. Yeah.
Listen, this might be our side. The 3 right here might be a little side podcast that we can do.
Let's go on the road. This is the new Breakfast Club right here.
Everybody, please make sure you follow these 2. Help them. I don't even know what else to say, but you can follow them. Be inspired.
Share the knowledge.
Yes.
Definitely follow the podcast for season 3. This is my first 2-person interview and talk, and fellow podcasters too. This is my first one with another podcaster. So follow them at Trailblazers, the podcast. You can follow her at Mujer de Calidad and Mariela Regal.
Yep.
That's it on IG. Make sure you do that. You can follow me at Marcos Luis, MarcosLuis. Follow the show, join the artist community on the Facebook page. That is OneMicNite, OneMicNite everything. OneMicNite is spelled OneMicNite. Thank you all for joining me for this episode.
Yay!